For backpackers, Australia is a dream, a land of endless horizons, stunning landscapes, and the promise of adventure. But for 7 young lives, that dream ended in a nightmare deep within the dark confines of the Belanglo State Forest. This is the story of Ivan Milat, the backpacker killer, a man who unleashed a brutal reign of terror, forever scarring the landscape and shattering the innocence of a nation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Australia was a magnet for young adventurers from across the globe. Thousands of backpackers, predominantly from Europe, flocked to its shores, drawn by the allure of its unique wilderness, vibrant cities, and the promise of a life-changing experience. Many chose to hitchhike, a common and often safe way to travel between distant towns, immersing themselves in the vastness of the Australian outback. But beneath this veneer of freedom and adventure, a sinister shadow was beginning to stretch across the country. Unbeknownst to these unsuspecting travelers, a predator was lurking, waiting to exploit their trust and vulnerability. Their journey into the unknown would lead them not to thrilling discoveries, but to a terrifying and ultimately fatal encounter. The setting for this horror was the Belanglo State Forest, a dense, remote pine plantation located in the southern highlands of New South Wales, about 120 kilometers southwest of Sydney. It was a place of solitude, often visited by campers and locals for recreational activities, but soon its name would become synonymous with unspeakable evil. The first disappearances that would later be linked to the backpacker killer began in 1989. Over the next 4 years, a chilling pattern emerged. Young, foreign backpackers, sometimes traveling in pairs, vanished without a trace along the major highways leading out of Sydney. Their worried families back home, often thousands of miles away, initiated frantic searches and appeals, but the vastness of Australia offered few answers. The authorities initially treated these as separate missing person cases with no immediate connection. The scale of Australia's landscape, combined with the transient nature of backpackers, made it difficult to link the disappearances. But as the list of missing grew, an uneasy sense of dread began to settle upon those working the cases. On September 19, 1992, 2 bushwalkers in the Belanglo State Forest stumbled upon a gruesome sight – human remains partially buried beneath debris. Further examination confirmed they were the bodies of Caroline Clark, 21, and Joanne Walters, 22, both British backpackers who had gone missing from Sydney in April that year. The discovery immediately ignited a massive police operation known as Operation Sunset. Detectives, forensic teams, and search parties descended upon Belanglo. The initial findings were horrifying. Both women had been brutally murdered, subjected to extreme violence. Joanne Walters had been stabbed 14 times and Caroline Clark had been shot 10 times in the head, indicative of a cold-blooded execution. Evidence suggested they had also been sexually assaulted and extensively tortured. Just over a month later, on October 4, 1993, another pair of bushwalkers made a second, equally disturbing discovery nearby. This time, the remains of James Gibson, 19, and Deborah Everest, 19, an Australian couple missing since December 1989, were found. Their bodies were also partially buried, and the nature of their deaths mirrored the earlier victims. Deborah had suffered a fractured skull and stab wounds, while James had been stabbed 8 times and his spine severed. The pattern was now undeniable. 2 sets of victims, all young backpackers, all brutally murdered, and all hidden in the same remote forest. Fear gripped the nation. Backpackers were warned, travel advisories were issued, and the vast, beautiful Australian wilderness suddenly seemed to hold a dark, predatory secret. The search of Belanglo intensified dramatically. Police combed through every inch of the dense forest, battling difficult terrain and the emotional toll of their discoveries. On November 1, 1993, they found the body of Simone Smittle, 21, a German backpacker who had disappeared in January 1991. She had been stabbed 8 times, including a fatal wound to the back. Then, on November 5, 1993, the last 2 victims were discovered. Gabor Neugebauer, 21, and Anja Habschied, 20, another German couple who had vanished in December 1991. Gabor had been shot 6 times in the head, and Anja had been decapitated. The missing head was never found. These discoveries brought the toll of confirmed victims to 7. The sheer brutality and consistency of the methods shocked even seasoned investigators. All victims had been targeted for their vulnerability as hitchhikers, taken to a secluded location and subjected to prolonged torture before being murdered. Their bodies were partially covered, some in shallow graves, others simply hidden beneath branches. This meticulous yet chilling pattern pointed to a single, highly dangerous individual, or possibly more, operating with calculated precision. With 7 bodies now linked, the police launched a massive, coordinated effort known as Task Force Air. Led by Detective Superintendent Paul Gordon, the task force comprised more than 100 officers determined to find the monster preying on innocent travelers. Their headquarters, dubbed the Hilton, became a hub of intense activity where whiteboards covered every wall detailing timelines, victim profiles, and potential suspects. The task force focused on several key aspects. Firstly, they appealed to the public for information, particularly from anyone who might have seen the victims hitchhiking or in the company of suspicious individuals. They created detailed profiles of the victims, analyzing their travel plans and last known movements. Secondly, they meticulously examined the crime scenes. Forensic teams spent weeks in Belanglo recovering every possible piece of evidence, from bullets and shell casings to fibers, fingerprints, and even small fragments of personal belongings. This evidence would be crucial in linking the killer to his victims. The most important piece of information came from Paul Onions, a British backpacker who had narrowly escaped a similar abduction attempt in January 1990. Onions had been hitchhiking south of Sydney when he was picked up by a man driving a white Nissan Patrol. During the drive, the driver suddenly pulled a gun and forced him to help him retrieve equipment from the back of the vehicle. Fearing for his life, Onions managed to escape, flagging down a passing car and immediately reporting the incident to the police. His detailed description of the driver and his vehicle was critical even though it wasn't immediately connected to the Belanglo murders. Task Force Air developed a list of over 200 potential suspects, narrowing it down to 32 individuals of particular interest. They focused on men who owned white Nissan Patrols, lived in the Southern Highlands region, had military or police backgrounds due to the precision of the killings, and had no clear alibis. Paul Onion's description became a key filter, but it was a painstaking process of elimination. The investigation also grappled with the sheer scale of the task. They needed to identify a killer who could blend seamlessly into the community yet commit acts of unimaginable depravity. The lack of an immediate motive other than sadistic pleasure made the profile even more elusive. The pressure from the public, international media, and grieving families was immense, demanding answers and the apprehension of the backpacker killer. The breakthrough finally came through a combination of meticulous police work and a crucial witness. Paul Onions, watching news reports of the Belanglo discoveries from his home in the UK, recognized the location and the methods. He contacted Australian police, stating he believed the killer was the same man who had attempted to abduct him years earlier. His detailed description, combined with advancements in vehicle identification, led police to focus on one family, the Milats. The Milat family had a large presence in the Southern Highlands, and several members owned white Nissan Patrols. As police investigated further, they found that Ivan Robert Marco Milat, born in 1944, a road worker and former truck driver, matched Paul Onion's description almost perfectly. Ivan Milat had also previously worked at the Roads and Traffic Authority, which gave him extensive knowledge of the area, including remote tracks in places like Belanglo. On May 22, 1994, armed with a search warrant and the compelling testimony of Paul Onions, police executed a dawn raid on Ivan Milat's home in Eagle Vale, a suburb of Sydney. The raid was massive, involving over 100 police officers. What they found inside his home and other properties associated with him was horrifying and irrefutable. The evidence unearthed was sickening in its specificity and quantity. Police discovered items belonging to the victims: a sleeping bag owned by James Gibson, cameras and clothing belonging to Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters, the camping gear of Anya Habshid and Gabor Noija Berger, including a tent, a significant collection of weapons, including parts of a .22 caliber rifle matching the one used to shoot Caroline Clark, dozens of knives, ropes, and handcuffs. The sheer volume of victims' belongings stored like trophies was chilling. This was not a random act. This was a calculated collection of memorabilia from his horrific crimes. The items matched descriptions given by the victims' families, who had painstakingly detailed their loved ones' possessions. Paul Onions was also brought to Australia to positively identify Milat, which he did with certainty. The evidence was overwhelming. Ivan Milat was arrested and charged with 7 counts of murder. The man who had terrorized backpackers and haunted a nation was finally in custody. His capture brought a profound sense of relief to the public, but for the victims' families, it was only the beginning of a long and painful legal battle for justice. The trial of Ivan Milat began in March 1996. It was one of the most high-profile and disturbing criminal trials in Australian history, drawing immense public and media attention. Prosecutors meticulously presented the overwhelming evidence. Paul Onion's direct testimony of the attempted abduction, the vast array of victims' belongings found at Milat's properties, forensic evidence linking weapons found to the specific murder methods, witness testimonies from people who had seen Milat picking up hitchhikers or acting suspiciously near Belanglo, Milat's knowledge of the secluded forest tracks. Despite the compelling evidence, Milat maintained his innocence, often behaving erratically in court. He attempted to cast doubt on the police investigation, claiming he was framed. However, his denials were no match for the mountain of evidence presented by the prosecution. The jury, after a long and grueling trial, delivered a unanimous verdict. On July 27, 1996, Ivan Milat was found guilty of all 7 murders. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences, meaning he would never be released from prison. Justice, after years of terror and agonizing uncertainty, had finally been served for the victims and their families. Milat spent the rest of his life incarcerated, mostly at Goulburn Supermax Prison, one of Australia's highest security facilities. He continued to deny his guilt until his death from cancer on October 27, 2019, at the age of 74. Even on his deathbed, he offered no confessions or explanations, leaving behind a legacy of pure, unadulterated evil. The impact of the backpacker killer case on Australia was profound. It shattered the nation's sense of innocent hospitality, especially towards young travelers. Hitchhiking, once a common practice, became fraught with danger and rapidly declined. The Belanglo State Forest, once just a patch of trees, became a chilling memorial to unimaginable horror, forever marked by the atrocities committed within its depths. Beyond the 7 victims he was convicted of killing, police and criminologists suspect Milat may have been responsible for other unsolved disappearances and murders in the region. His name remains synonymous with the darkest aspects of humanity, a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. The memory of Caroline Clark, Joanne Walters, James Gibson, Deborah Everest, Simone Schmidl, Gabor Mujibauer, and Anja Habshid lives on. Their stories serve as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk even in the most beautiful of places, and the relentless determination of those who seek to bring monsters like Ivan Milat to justice. The victims sought adventure, they found terror, and a nation learned a painful lesson about vulnerability. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of Australia's most infamous true crime cases. If you have any thoughts or insights, please share them respectfully in the comments below. Your engagement helps keep these stories from being forgotten.